Hello, welcome back. In this video, we're going to learn about for loops. It's another type of loop in Java. Let's go ahead and create our new class and name it for loop. Create our main method, hit finish. Now, in this video, we're not going to display numbers 1 through 10 like we did for while loop and do while. Here we're going to try to use arrays that we learned about in earlier section. We're going to use an array. We're going to put a bunch of numbers in that array, and we're going to use for loop to display whatever numbers are stored in that array into the console. Right? Let's go ahead and create a new array. If you remember, to create an integer array, you would type int, then the square brackets, then you need to give a name for the array. Let's name it numbers. And to initialize the array, you would use the curly braces and put a bunch of numbers in there. So 22, 34, 54, 66, 78. So there are 5 numbers in the array, and we're going to try to display the numbers using a for loop. To do that, you need to execute a loop that will execute 5 times, and each time it will display whatever value is stored in the array in that position. So if you remember, arrays always start with 0 position. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the loop will execute 5 times, and each time it will display the value stored in that particular position. Now the syntax of the for loop goes like this. It would be for, and then open parenthesis. There are 3 sections within this parenthesis for a for loop. So I'm going to type the 2 semicolons, which separates each of those sections. In the first section, you would give whatever you want to initialize. Whatever statement you want to execute only once. So if the loop executes 5 times, whatever you type in the first section executes only once when the for loop starts executing. It doesn't execute 5 times. So here we want to create a counter or something that we would use to traverse this array, right? So let's define an integer. Let's name it I and give an initial value of 0 because the first position of an array is 0. So we want to start at 0. The second part in the for loop is basically a condition. Just like the conditions we saw in while loop, the loop would execute until that condition is true. Same way, here we would specify a condition. Until the condition is true, the loop will keep executing. And in this case, we want the loop to execute 5 times because we have 5 numbers here. We can type I less than 5. Keep in mind, it should be less than 5, not less than or equal to 5 because the positions are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So we don't want to execute for the fifth time. That's only fourth position in the array, in this array. So we could do this, or there is another better way to do it. Instead of hard coding 5 here, we can actually derive the length of the array, or actually get the length of the array automatically. To do that, you would type numbers, which is the name of the array, hit a dot. Eclipse will give you a list of options. You see there's a length here. Length returns the length of the array. So if there are 5 numbers, this would return 5. If there are 7 numbers, it would return 7. So this way, we don't need to hard code 5. Later on, if we add more numbers, we would have to come in and change here. Otherwise, if you use numbers.length or array.length, you would automatically get the size of the array or length of the array. So that's our condition. We want the loop to execute from 0 to 4, and we got that covered here. The third part here is basically a statement that will execute each time in the loop, right? Every time the loop comes back, the statement would execute. This would normally be your counter. So right here, we increment it each time because we want to get out of the loop at some point. Same way here, you could specify I++. For the loop section, you would hit a curly brace. Whatever statement you enter within these curly braces would execute for each iteration of the loop. And in here, we want to do system.out.println numbers, open square bracket, I. and then end it with a semicolon. Let's save it. So just quickly run through this. The first time when this executes, I would be 0, 0 would be less than numbers.length 5. So 0 would be less than 5. That time I++ does not execute. The very first time it wouldn't execute. So when it gets to the loop body, we're going to display numbers of I, so numbers of 0, which would be 22. And when the loop goes back up, this statement would not execute, but this statement would. So I would become 1. 1 would still be less than 5, so we're good. Now we would display numbers of 1, which would be 34, so on and so forth. Now let's try to run it to see if we get that output. So right click, run as Java application. There you go. We got 22, 34, 54, 60, and 78 displayed in that order. Now you can change numbers here or add numbers. Since we use numbers.length, you don't need to change anything else. Save it, just run it. Now you got all those numbers displayed. So that's why numbers.length is much more convenient and flexible than entering the actual size here. So this is for loop, but actually there is another type of for you can do when you want to traverse an array. It's called an enhanced for loop. We will look at that also here. And we would try to use the enhanced for loop to achieve the same output, right? I'm going to go ahead and quickly comment this out because we're going to try to do a different type of for loop to get the same output. I'm going to clear the console. Now I'm going to type a comment to say this is enhanced for loop. The enhanced for loop goes like this. It would still start with for. There are only two sections in enhanced for. Now this is an integer array, right? So let's go ahead and type int number and then a colon, not a semicolon, and then numbers. I'll explain what this is in a bit. Let's open a curly brace and close it. And within that, we're going to just display number this time of number. Let's save it, quickly run it to see what we get. There you go. We got the same output from 22 to 79, whatever we got earlier. But this enhanced for is much more simpler than this one. In here, what's going on is we're defining an integer number, and this time we are going to use it not as a counter like we did earlier, but actually to get the number from the array, right? So when Java executes, it knows this is an integer array and this is an integer. So for every iteration of the loop, it's going to assign that position's value from the array into number. So the very first time it executes, it's going to assign 22 to number, and it displays that. The next time it would be 34 and it displays that, so on and so forth until 99. So Java automatically knows what position of the array it is in for each iteration, and it will assign that particular value to this. And we're trying to display that value so we get the same output as earlier. So to traverse an array, you can easily use enhanced for and write simpler code that would basically take care of counters and everything for you. And this is not only limited to integers, you can use for any type of array. Even an array of objects, it would work just fine. So that's basically for loop. Try to play with both these types of loops, because this would you would use when you want to traverse an array. For every other situation, you would use this for loop. So both of these for loops are very widely used in Java. So play with it. Make sure you are much comfortable with it, because for loops is something that is very frequently used. Thank you. See you in the next video.